The rain had settled into the kind that didn't fall hard enough to feel dramatic, just steady enough to soak through a jacket if you stood still too long. I was standing beside the cemetery parking lot holding a torn black garbage bag. Not luggage, not boxes, a garbage bag. The knot at the top had come loose, and one sleeve from an old sweater hung out into the rainwater like someone had packed carelessly on purpose. My older brother Gavin had handed it to me 20 minutes earlier outside the church hall. "That's Dad's stuff you wanted," he'd said, brushing rain from his coat. "Figured you should get your inheritance early." Then he laughed, not loudly, not cruelly enough for people to call him out, just enough for the two cousins standing nearby to look uncomfortable. Behind him, through the church windows, people drifted toward coffee and sandwiches. The warm part of grief, the organized part. Inside, Gavin looked like the grieving son everyone expected. Outside, I looked like someone who'd shown up late to collect leftovers. I should say this wasn't surprising. Gavin had always understood performance better than responsibility. He lived 2 states away, worked in commercial real estate, drove expensive cars that somehow always looked newly washed. He remembered birthdays if someone reminded him first. I lived 20 minutes from Dad. When the memory problem started, I was the one learning medication names I couldn't pronounce. I knew which cabinet Dad hid unpaid bills in because he got embarrassed when he forgot what they were. I knew which stories he repeated when he was tired and which ones meant he was scared. Still, none of that made me special. It just made me nearby. The truth about caring for someone is that eventually it becomes invisible. People stop thanking you because you're simply the person who does it. Toward the end, Gavin started appearing more often, short visits. Hospital selfies with captions about family time. He had a way of arriving exactly when nurses were nearby. Dad noticed too. Though he never said much. He wasn't a bitter man. 3 weeks before he died, he asked me to take him for a drive. He barely had energy for short walks by then, but that morning he was strangely focused. "Need air," he'd said. We parked near the lake where he used to take us fishing. Mostly, he stared through the windshield. Then, after a long silence, he said, "You don't have to argue with your brother when things get noisy." I remember laughing awkwardly. "Okay, no," he said quietly. "Promise me." Something about his tone made me stop. "I promise." He nodded like we'd finished discussing something larger than I understood. Then he asked whether I'd remembered to change the furnace filter at the house. That was Dad Heavey moment. Practical detail. Same breath. Back in the present, rain slid down my collar. I looked into the garbage bag. A chipped coffee mug, Dad's brown cardigan, old paperwork, things no one wanted. Inside the hall, I could see Gavin talking near the refreshments table. He stood beside a man in a navy suit, his lawyer, apparently already gesturing with confident little movements I recognized from family arguments. He wasn't whispering. "House needs updates anyway," I heard him say as I stepped inside. "Probably sell it by summer." Someone asked gently, "What about Ethan?" Gavin shrugged. "He'll land on his feet." Like I was 12, like we hadn't both crossed 40 already. I almost left. Honestly, I think I would have, not out of dignity, out of exhaustion. Grief makes strange things feel impossible. Even staying in a room can feel like lifting furniture. I was near the coat rack when someone touched my elbow. A woman in a charcoal coat stood beside me, professional posture, folder in hand. "Ethan Mercer?" I nodded. "I'm Claire Bennett, your father's estate attorney." For a second I thought she had mistaken me for someone else. "We've been trying to locate you," she said carefully. "There appears to be some confusion regarding the estate." Confusion, that word moved through the room faster than Ray's voices ever could. Gavin noticed us immediately. He walked over smiling, though not warmly. "Oh good," he said. "We were just discussing next steps." Claire didn't smile back. "Yes," she said evenly. "That's precisely why we should clarify matters." The room grew quiet in the awkward, involuntary way rooms do when people pretend not to listen. She opened the folder. "3 weeks before your father's passing," she said, "he amended several legal arrangements." Gavin crossed his arms. "What arrangements?" "The property deed," she said first, then the financial authority, then the remainder of the estate. Every sentence landed softer than I expected. No dramatic pause, no movie moment, just paperwork. Clear language, finished signatures. Dad had transferred primary ownership of the house to me, established a smaller trust distribution for Gavin, and included written instructions explaining the decision. Gavin blinked like someone trying to refocus after bright headlights. "That doesn't make sense," he said. Claire remained calm. "Your father was evaluated and considered legally competent at signing." "You seriously think Ethan arranged this?" Nobody answered, not even me, because the truth was, I looked just as surprised. Then Claire unfolded a separate letter. "Your father requested this specifically for Ethan." She handed it to me. My hands shook harder than I expected. The writing looked uneven. Near the end, one sentence sat alone. I knew who made staying look easy. That was it. No apology, no grand explanation, just recognition across the room. Gavin started saying something about misunderstandings influenced timing. Claire answered him professionally, patiently. "Authority has a strange effect on family dynamics. It doesn't erase resentment, but it clarifies reality, quietly, publicly, unmistakably." I set the garbage bag on a nearby chair. Rainwater dripped onto the floor beneath it, Dad's sweater sleeve still hanging out. Nobody laughed anymore. A few weeks later, I found that same cardigan while cleaning the hallway closet. I almost donated it. Instead, I hung it back up. The house felt too quiet. The grief still came in waves. Gavin and I barely spoke. Fairness, it turns out, doesn't heal history. But sometimes it restores something smaller, something useful, the feeling that maybe you hadn't imagined your own effort all those years. Sometimes dignity returns quietly, like someone finally saying, I saw it. I just hadn't known how to say it sooner.